Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Strategic Planning Committee here at County Hall on Tuesday, the 6th of July. First of all, just to take you through roughly the procedures that we go through on a planning committee. As chair, I often always introduce the application, point out any site visit videos we might have had or information. I then ask the planning officer to present the application, give us any updates, changes to recommendation, and present their report. We then have a slot for public speaking, 5 minutes for an objector, 5 minutes for a local member or parish councillor, and then 5 minutes for a supporter. Then I ask committee members if they've got any questions they'd like to put to our planning officers, and then we go to the debate. Normally I would ask for a proposal. I would ask for that to be seconded. We then have the vote, the debate, and then we would take a vote on that application. Apologies for absence. Have we any apologies for absence today?
Yes, Chair, we've received apologies from Councillors Dodd, Swinbank and Watson.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting, minutes of the previous strategic planning meeting held on Tuesday, the 8th of June. They've been circulated. Are members happy that they're a true record of that meeting? Thank you. Disclosures of members' interests. Any members got any disclosures they'd like to make on the two applications before us today? Councillor Reid?
Yeah, I've got a conflict of interest on both of them, Chair, so I'll withdraw.
Thank you. Councillor Barry Flux?
I just noted on item 6 that Crampton Town Council were a consultee. I am a Crampton Town Councillor. I took no part in the committee meeting where that was discussed, and I just wanted to state that here and now.
So you'll take full part in the debate?
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you, Councillor Flux. And yes, sorry, Julie Foster.
Thank you, Chair. Just to mention, Choppington Parish Council have put in a strong support for this application. I am a parish councillor with that parish council, but I've taken no part in any of that decision.
So you as well be taking full part?
I will be taking part, yes. Thank you.
Julie. Thank you. No other declarations. Thank you very much. So we've got two planning applications this afternoon. We've got the erection of the battery manufacturing plant, and then we've also got the provision of some temporary substations. So those two before us this afternoon. I just wanted to say a little few words before we start. Members, this is one of the largest and most important applications ever to come before our planning committee at Northumberland County Council. The sheer scale of the issues is enormous. However, our officers have put a huge amount of work into bringing this application before us today. A manufacturing plant of this size brings with it many planning issues for us to consider, but hopefully with our extensive site visit that we had yesterday and the briefing that we get from our officers today will put us in a much more informed position to take this important decision this afternoon. While planning issues are uppermost in our mind and, you know, we're always thinking of how we might mitigate any negative impacts to the benefit of the local residents, in this particular case, the economic benefits of this scheme must also play a central part in our decision making today. So without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask Judith Murphy, the case officer, to present her case. Rob Murphin is also going to speak this afternoon, our planning director, in a presentation, And I think we're also going to have a contribution from David Fergie on ecological issues. Judith, can I ask you to present the application, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So the application today is for the erection of battery manufacturing plant with ancillary offices, together with associated development and infrastructure works, including site preparation works, ground modelling, drainage, landscaping, vehicular access, cycle and pedestrian access, parking provision, substation and other associated works. And the site is the land at the former power station site on northern side of Camas. Can I just check that everybody, Chairman, has seen the updates that were circulated earlier today? Okay. Okay, so to give a little bit of background, first of all, of what the Giga plant is about and some facts and figures to visualise as we go through the presentation. The purpose of the Giga plant is to produce world-class lithium-ion batteries, with the first phase of the facility intended to be operational by 2023 and at full capacity by 2028. Once at full capacity, the Giga plant will have a production capability that equates to around 300,000 electric vehicle battery packs each year, intended primarily for the automotive industry. And as you're all probably very much aware, this is the former coal stocking yard, which formed part of the Blythe power station site. So moving on to the first slide, the location plans. So this is the site. And to the north are the dwellings around Wembley Terrace and Wembley Gardens, just here. And to the east is the railway line, which runs along in this direction here. Camas First School is in the vicinity. Some small number of manufacturing type units are also along the eastern side, and residential towards the southern end down here. To the south is a small cluster of residential dwellings and the NEP site, which is over the road around here, and the Port of Blythe further south, so that's more off where this photograph is, on the opposite side of the road. To the west, further along Brock Lane, is the converter building, so that's it somewhere over here. So this is just another slide really with the site and the surroundings with a little bit more detail on. You can see there's the motocross circuit there just for bearings, Wembley Gardens, and the train line and East Sleekburn to the south. So moving on to the master plan, this shows the proposals for the Giga plant and how it will sit within the site. It's the plan members had with them yesterday, so on the site visit, so you're probably now mildly familiar with this. It is quite small on the screen, so I will talk you through it. This is the Giga plant building itself, and just to note some dimensions of the building, they are, it will sit at 553 metres by 460 metres at a height of 28 metres. There will be 6 stacks on top of the building, and they will all measure 10.5 metres each. Now, parking is to the south and the east, so these are the parking bays to the south and to the east here, with 1,124 parking bays in total being provided. The main entrance to the building for staff and visitors will be on the eastern elevation, around about this area here. And there'll also be a number of electric charging points dotted around the car park, as well as bike storage areas. There's a number of access points around the building. They're indicated around about here on the plan. There's some at the top for the logistics end and some more on the eastern side. The staff and visitors entrance, which is where we entered the site yesterday on the site visit, is located here in the southeast corner and has a walkway and cycle lane running alongside and right through the site from the southeast corner to the northwest corner. So that's the track here that runs right through the site. Now that corner there is where the cycle access and a pedestrian access and emergency vehicle access is as well. The logistics entrance here in the southwest corner, which will travel through to the northern edge of the site, is where all of the logistics yard is located. So again, logistics HGVs will come through here and up to the north end where all the logistics area is. The logistic yard caters for a number of HGVs. at any one time with a waiting area and a quarantine area and a compound facility. There is a cycle and pedestrian access point in the northwest corner of the site, which I think I mentioned before. The northern edge of the site will be bounded by 2 4-metre high acoustic fences, one sat around here, the other sat in this area here, and a 6-metre high acoustic fence which is more centrally located around here. Now along here as well, there'll be a series of some bunds as well, just to help with the acoustics of the site. Moving back to the vehicular entrance for the HGVs, there is a waiting area for outgoing and incoming HGVs around here to avoid any build-up of any spillage onto Brock Lane. There will also be a 3-metre high acoustic fence erected along the right-hand side of the logistics entrance in this area here. And that is for protection to the residents to the east. It should be noted that this access won't be brought into use until that fence is erected. Until that time, the staff visitors entrance will be used for the HGVs in the very early construction part of the process. But there is work to be done on the logistics entrance to bring it up to standard and ready for use. So until that is complete, then the staff and visitors entrance will be used. But it is really to note that it will only be for that short intervening period. Other areas to point out is the triangle here, which is open space to the north of the dwellings, which remains as such. There are no definitive plans at this stage to alter that in any way. Also to note is that the trees you see here on the plan, largely around this area here, will remain. As members saw on site yesterday, these act as a great buffer for the development, for the residents. The height of the trees is likely to mean that the Giga plant won't be easily visible, if at all, from the ground of this residential area, given the Giga plant's setback on the site. There will be a small number of trees to be removed, and these are predominantly around the southeast corner here of the site to facilitate space for staff and visitor access and part of the proposed substation. The blue coloured areas that you can see across the site are ponds, watercourses and or swales. So it's around this area here. There will be a small diversion of the public right-of-way in the bottom southwest corner. The black dotted line here is where an existing right-of-way which will be removed, and a new right-of-way will be constructed along here, which will link into the existing right-of-way, which is the green dotted line, which follows that path. Finally, on this plan, just to point out that the PFA mounds are to be retained on the eastern side. There are 2 of these, and PFA is pulverised fuel ash. There is a condition attached to the report, which is number 40, which requires further information to be submitted through a landscape and ecological management plan to address the management and monitoring of suitable habitats on the PFA mounds. There will be works to the existing cycle track along Brock Lane, which sits outside of the site. We do have our Highways Development Management Manager here today who will explain this to you in more detail after my presentation. So these are some proposed elevations of the Giga plant. So the first is the front of house facade. The second is the approach from the southeast. The third, bottom left, is the logistics area to the north. And the bottom right is a bird's eye view from the east of what the finished product will look like. And here are some more proposed elevations. So from the top there is the east, the north, the west elevation and the south elevation. And this really is just another proposed building layout to show the 3 floors, ground floor, first floor, second floor. And a lot of the red that you see here on the second floor is plant. Another plan just to show really the building heights, and that a lot of the black on the roof here relates to plant, and there's basically a lower roof and an upper roof, but that's not going to be usable to the staff. So another bird's eye view of the Giga plant. And then moving on from that plan, to the landscape and master plan. Again, this is difficult to see, so I'll just highlight the key elements. All of the areas that you can see in the brightest green reflect the existing vegetation, which is to be retained. The small misshapen red areas show where the existing vegetation is to be removed. So they really are very small. They're just around this area here. And there's also some neutral grassland, amenity grass within the site as well, shown in the other green areas. The little sort of dots that you can see around the site, that is new tree planting. So I'll touch on residential amenity and proximity of residential dwellings to the Giga plant. The rear garden of the nearest property to the Giga plant at Wembley Terrace is located 193 metres to the north. To the south, the nearest residential garden at Northfield is 388 metres away. As we saw from the site visit yesterday and from the slides today, it's likely that the Giga plant will barely be visible from the Northfield residents, particularly, who will also be protected from noise sources by acoustic fencing. From the north, the Giga plant will be more visible. However, it will be equally protected by the high acoustic fencing along the northern perimeter and the bunds that are proposed towards the eastern corner of the site and further working westwards along that northern boundary. Given the substantial distances from all nearest located residential dwellings and the mitigation measures to be put in place, it's considered that their own amenity will be adequately protected. So turning to ecology matters, we do have our ecologist here with us today who can explain what is proposed in much greater detail, but just briefly and by way of mitigation, a biodiversity net gain metric has been completed by the developer's ecologist and our own ecologist in respect of land at Potland Burn, former open cast site, on which habitat creation is sufficient to ensure a net gain of just over 10% overall for the British Vault scheme will be undertaken and funded by British Vault. As I say, there's more detail on that in your report. However, David Viger will be here to answer any questions you have around that. One final point to mention is in relation to education and training. And just to recap some important points around that, the site is proposed to be constructed over 3 phases, with phase 1 opening in 2023, phase 2 in 2025, and finally phase 3 due to be operational in 2028, with a total of around 2,910 workers. Of these, 300 will be office workers, with the rest being operational workers working to shift patterns. In terms of provision of employment skills, the applicant has agreed to enter into a Section 106 agreement to recognise their commitment locally during the construction phase and subsequently as a local employer, prioritising the employment of local people where possible and developing training, education and skills development to prepare the local workforce. There will be 3 strands to this commitment, which are a construction local supplier employment strategy, an employment strategy and a training skills plan. All the information in this is within the report. I won't go into it in much more detail than that at this stage, but obviously if members do have any questions around that, we will be able to answer them after the presentation. So just a few more slides to show site photographs looking west along Brock Lane, another one looking east along Brock Lane, the logistics entrance roundabout, again along Brock Lane. The visitor staff entrance at the east end of Brock Lane, which is where we accessed the site yesterday. And views looking towards the site from the rear of Wembley Terrace. So that really looks largely across the site of where the Giga plant will sit. And finally, a view from Camas Beach Road looking west towards existing trees and the bund behind which the Giga plant will be located. Chair, the recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to the conditions within the report and the updates listed earlier that were circulated to members and the completion of the Section 106 agreement to secure the following obligations. And they are financial contribution of £1,688,400 towards off-site ecological compensation and net gain to be attributed to the Potland Burn site. The provision of highway works, including suitable sustainable connectivity along Brock Lane and the entering into a highways agreement, a construction local supplier employment strategy, an employment plan and a training skills plan. There's just one final slide I will turn to. Chair, that really completes my presentation. There are a couple of key matters which I understand Rob is now going to pick up on. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Judith. Judith explained well the nature and scale and description of the scheme. I wanted to give some members some advice on how they should approach making this decision. Okay. First of all, we need to look at this as a conventional planning application and its use of material considerations. So the starting point is development plan policy. And the report sets out that both the Wensbeck local plan and the emerging local plan, which is now at the final modification stage, subject to the final consultation prior to adoption, both support very clearly and unambiguously this proposal. We then need to look at what weight I recommend you attach to various considerations. On the basis of the analysis in the report, there are no identified unacceptable impacts, and I'm recommending that you give significant weight to the economic growth benefits of this scheme. I think you will be acting reasonably by attaching a significant weight to that because of the implicit nature of the development and the fact, as just explained, we have sought to achieve the localisation of the economic benefits by a range of skills and employment and local supplier requirements attached to the permission as well. What this will mean that, hopefully, that jobs created by this scheme, that we've done everything to make sure that it won't just be taken up by long distance commuting and that local communities will benefit both short and longer terms from that. Okay. Also, the scheme fundamentally is a part of this country meeting its climate change objectives. Okay. With the economic benefits then, the climate change benefits, and the absence of unacceptable impacts, I think we can conclude that the scheme, for the purposes of the National Planning Policy Framework, represents sustainable development. Okay. There is a second dimension to all of this. As one of the largest applications handled in this country, this scheme is also subject to environmental impact assessment, and this is a really important part of the evaluation. Okay. In some respects, an environmental impact assessment application adds on and supplements a normal application with additional information. However, it is far more than that. Okay. What it does actually, it requires the council to make sure that it has access to information to understand the environmental implications of this scheme. Okay. So what the report does, and you'll see it at things like on page 21, it sets out the key EIA issues. And you need to ask yourselves, has this application been subject to EIA in both procedural requirements and in terms of the quality, in terms of how it has actually fed into the decision? Okay, so procedural requirements are the fact that the right information has been asked for, it's up to date, the public has had access to that information, we have sought the views of all the statutory consultees, and I'll suggest particularly Natural England and the Environment Agency in that regard. And then, how have we used the environmental impact assessment process? And that's by understanding the potential impacts, both on a cumulative and a synergistic way. And from that, have we understood then the mitigation required to address environmental impacts? And has that mitigation been secured, and this is the critical part, by the way the decision has been made? Okay. So to move on, we received a large amount of information as part of the EIA process, and we worked with statutory consultees and local consultees. And what the report sets out is that there's been a triangulation here, that the assertions made by the applicant have been supported and backed up by that consultation process. We can say then, therefore, that the information is up to date, the conclusions are accepted, and the mitigation coming out of that analysis is both rational and deliverable. Okay. I won't touch into the details of the ecological impact because this is perhaps the biggest issue coming out of the environmental impact assessment, and this is why the off-site mitigation at Potland Burn is so significant. Okay. But I'll draw attention to things like paragraph 8.94 on page 45, which sets this out. Okay. So the conclusions from the officers in terms of handling this EIA application is that the EI process has been robust and that we have reached reasoned and reasonable conclusions as to the environmental impact of the scheme, that we have used those conclusions and integrated them into the decision, both to recommend approval, the recommended conditions and the recommended legal provisions, and therefore that the significant effects of development on the environment are properly understood. And this is a key test of the environmental impact assessment requirements. Okay. And then finally, I'll keep coming back to this, is that we understand the impacts and the mitigation required has been understood and has been incorporated into the decision. Okay. So unlike a conventional application, we will always for EIA applications, need to actually set out this approach in the actual final decision notice as well, if members are minded to approve it. Okay. You've heard a lot of mentions about ecology, and this is the single biggest issue to come out of the EIA process. So with that, I'll hand over very quickly to David, who'll talk about how we've evaluated this. And I would add, before David starts, this will represent nationally leading use of biodiversity net gain, and it will set a national standard for how applications are determined using this approach. Thank you. David?
Thank you, Rob. So a range of important ecological features were identified through the EIA process. Because it's a very large site and it's close to the coast, it's been largely undisturbed for some time, and it's got a range of different habitats on it, including wetlands. It's become important for a range of different bird species, including some of those associated with the designated sites, the SSSIs and the European sites on the coast. But also because there's extensive areas of very nutrient-poor substrates on the site, some very diverse plant communities have become established, including some uncommon species, and associated with those similarly diverse invertebrate communities, again including some uncommon species. So quite a wide range of important ecological features on what is a very large site. A certain amount of mitigation is possible on the site. Habitat creation on the PFA mounds. Fortunately, PFA is a really good substrate for creating things like species-rich grasslands. Most of the woodlands remaining on the site, and there's some enhancement that can be done there. And the Cowgut and the Moor Burn, both of which are culverted at the moment, are being restored. But because the footprint of the development is so large, only a small proportion of the necessary mitigation can be provided on site. It's just an inevitability given the size of the building. So it's necessary that we looked off-site to secure the bulk of the ecological mitigation that was required. So to ensure some objectivity and some transparency to this process, we decided to do something we haven't done before, which is to use a metric-based approach that DEFRA has developed over recent years, and which will become mandatory in a few years' time, so you'll be hearing a lot more about that in due course. But essentially, the metric uses a series of formulas that DEFRA has developed to assign a numerical value to the habitats that are present on site, and a numerical value to habitats that can be created. So this ensures that the overall balance of losses and gains can be assessed in an objective way. And it also ensures that a level of enhancement or net gain can be demonstrated over and above just compensating for what's lost. Now, given the area of land concerned, a large site was required for the habitat creation. And Potland Burn surface mine's ideally suited for that. It's large enough. It's subject to quite a lot of surface flooding, so it's going to be good for wetland creation, as well as for the terrestrial habitats we want to create. And currently it's just seeded with a basic grass lay, so that's a really good blank canvas, as it were, for habitat creation. In terms of funding the work, DEFRA requires that such sites can be managed for a minimum of 30 years and has published evidence concerning the costings that should be used when calculating appropriate payments. So we've used that evidence together with the experience of a few planning authorities who have been using this approach for some years to calculate a realistic financial contribution. Throughout the process, we've worked with Natural England as the statutory nature conservation organisation to ensure that they have no objection to the scheme and that they were happy to sign off the habitats regulations assessment that we had to prepare to go with it. Thank you.
Thanks for that, David. And the final thing I'll say to wrap all this up, you've heard a lot of information from Judith, myself and David, is that as a conventional application, it is policy compliant and there are no negative impacts associated with it, and the conditions and legal agreements help secure the economic benefits to enable you to attach significant weight to that element. And for the environmental impact assessment element of this scheme, I confirm this is our view that that process has been carried out robustly. But if members have any questions, could I ask them to be either framed about the conventional elements of the application or explicitly the EIA elements of the application? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Rob. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, we now come to our public speaking slot. We've only got supporters this afternoon who will share 5 minutes, and they are Guy Wakefield, the agent, and Peter Oulton, the chair of British Vault. So, gentlemen, over to you.
Chair, can I just clarify? I think Mr. Wakefield is going to have 2 minutes and Mr. Roulton is going to have 3 minutes. I'll stop after 2 minutes and then start again with Mr. Roulton. So whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon, members, and thank you for allowing us the opportunity to speak today. Firstly, we'd like to thank you and thank the officers involved in this application for their hard work and professionalism throughout the entire process. We'd also like to thank all of the parish and town councils who have wanted to engage with us to learn about the proposals and share their views on it. British Vault remains firmly committed to continuing those discussions going forward. The planning application was prepared following months of pre-application discussions with officers to understand what issues needed to be assessed. To this extent, the environmental statement and its 1,600 pages robustly assesses those range of matters. It concludes that no significant environmental effects will arise from the development subject to appropriate mitigation, which is to be secured through conditions and the Section 106 agreement. Mitigation measures include restrictions on when HGVs can travel to and from the site, working in shift patterns, and off-site contribution, for example, towards Potland Burn, which has just been raised by the officers. And that obviously addressing any effects from the development and providing a net ecological enhancement. From an economic and social perspective, the scheme has the potential to generate some 3,000 jobs and at its peak 2,400 construction workers. There's also the potential for subsequent employment opportunities to arise in the future and other benefits such as the use of the railway line. British Vault are committed to using local labour and realise the importance of training those people to make sure they're adequately fit for the jobs in hand. This is also reflected in the Section 106 agreement, where, for example, local people will be given opportunity during interviews. We hope that you will be able to support the recommendation given by officers, and I now hand over to Mr Rolton. Thank you very much indeed.
Mr Rolton, you have 3 minutes whenever you want to start.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr Chairman. Good evening, everybody. I'm Peter Rolton, Chairman of the UK CEO of British Volt. I'd like to say a big thank you for letting me to come and speak to you all this afternoon. British Volt is at the vanguard of electrification and mobility. Our world-class team plans to build the UK's first major Giga plant at a minimum capacity of 30 gigawatt hours, located in the former coal stockyards at Camas. I'd like to join Guy in thanking Rob and the NCC planning team. They have worked incredibly hard, efficiently and diligently alongside the British Volt team. It is a remarkable achievement that an application this size and scale has been able to be thoroughly processed, prepared and brought to committee for determination in such a timely manner. It is clear the UK automotive industry needs gigafactories, evidenced by the excellent work completed by the Advanced Propulsion Centre on behalf of BAYES, which indicates that between 4 and 8 gigafactories are required by 2030 to meet demand as we phase out vehicles powered by combustion engines. The Camas site chosen by British Volt is by far the best site in the United Kingdom. Its unique combination of grid, deep water port, rail and renewable power makes it such. As someone who's brought up in the North East between the ages of 6 and 23, it gives me immense pride to be able to offer this project to you for determination. I saw it firsthand in the 1970s and 80s, the deindustrialisation of the region, with the loss of traditional industries such as shipbuilding and mining. I myself left the North East after graduating from Northumbria University, then Newcastle Polytechnic, as I was unable to find employment locally in 1985. Returning, I find that people remain as friendly and hospitable as ever. However, areas such as Camas and Blythe are desperately in need of investment. The area requires new industries, further opportunities. It requires skilled and semi-skilled jobs for both current and future generations. Electric vehicles and the batteries that power them are part of the next industrial revolution as we transition to a zero-carbon economy. By placing this factory in Camas and work with NCC and Advanced Northumberland to attract further employment as part of our supply chain, we aim to be a catalyst for wider economic and social uplift across the area. I'm told by the local parish council that in Camas, 75% of young people aged 25 have left because they have lack of prospects, lack of jobs and little vision for the future. If we are successful with our planned application this afternoon, British Volt will be the first step on the journey that changes this, reverses it and supports the regeneration of the area and the community. It's a major opportunity to put Northumberland on the map as a world leader in transition to a zero-carbon society. Quite frankly, this is the most exciting project I've ever worked on. Thank you for your time and attention this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rolton. Thank you. We now come to the section of the planning meeting where we can field questions to our planning officers. Anyone like to ask a question? Councillor Gordon-Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. Rob, you mentioned before, it's absolutely right that we've got major investment, probably the biggest investment this county's had. It's all part of the country's future green credentials. But we've got to get down to fundamentals. Thank you very much for the report, the great work the officers have done, and that was probably the most informative site visit I've ever been on, although we're just looking at an empty field. It's been abandoned for many years, so delighted there's the possibility of investment being put on there. Can we talk about green as well? We spoke yesterday about the various ways in which I'm not going to talk about the logistics. We're going to talk more about the staff and the visitors getting there. So can I drill down a little bit more? We spoke about cycleways. We didn't really touch about bus services. We talked about the roads. I know the local member mentioned about the lack of street lighting approaching the site there as well. Are we future-proofed? You know, we've got some other fantastic businesses around there. We've got a lot of farms, which I was amazed to see yesterday, close to the very beautiful beach. We've also got Ferguson's Transport, huge area with heavies coming in and out, and delighted to see that Thompson's of Prudder have also got a lot of places across there as well. So are we future-proofed? Will the roads stand for this, and will they be safe? And where the people are coming from to work there. I'll let you build into that because we did discuss it a little bit yesterday. So thank you again.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Stewart. I can answer this. Okay. A large part of the negotiation and handling this application has been dealing with the fundamental concerns of Highways England about the impact of this scheme on the local road network. So from that perspective, and for the perspective of doing the right thing, we've put a lot of effort into getting cycle pedestrian routes into this. So what we've sought to achieve, and the recommended conditions and scheme give lots of hooks where we can flesh out the final details of this, but we have sought to make sure that links between Blythe and the site and other areas of population are factored into the design early on, so we are not going to preclude all that work being delivered as we move forward. We've put a lot of effort as well into getting some of the real detailed elements of this, because there are pinch points in the local network where for pedestrians and cyclists we will need to use land in other people's ownership, and so that has formed part of the Section 106 requirements. I would add that what we haven't been able to achieve, and that had we had an unlimited amount of time, it would have been good to get rail connectivity directly onto the site as an important part of modal shift and taking people off the roads. However, throughout the handling of the application, we have been talking to the applicant about how this can be best achieved. And as we sit here today, that work has been progressed. And I understand that the company are at heads of terms stage talking to Network Rail about potential rail direct access into the site. I would suggest that all these issues have been looked at in terms of transport. But if I could just bring in very quickly here our specialist on highways, and someone you may have not met before. It's called Chris Mead. He's our new head of Highways Development Management. For him to talk about, just very quickly, Chris, about the range of initiatives and things that have been taken place to help secure what I call sustainable transport into the site. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Good afternoon, councillors. The scheme's ambitious by its very merits, because it's looking to strive towards close to 50% sustainable travel as soon as it gets off the ground. That's 20% by the shuttle bus service, which it's committed to. That's 7% by cycling, 1% by walking, and about 17% by arriving in someone else's vehicle. And those are all indicated in their travel plan targets, which we've conditioned them to. In terms of future-proofing, the commitment they've made to the land to provide the cycle track will be a 4-metre wide facility. That meets the newest standards for cycleway provision in this country and shared facilities. It will be one of the best facilities that Northumberland has, and it will be one that we can point to other developers to ensure that we get the quality that we're looking for. The street lighting, the applicant has recognised during the road safety audit process that they need to review that, and that they've made a full commitment to do so. So in terms of the points kind of raised, I think that addresses those issues.
Thank you, Chris. Okay.
Thank you very much. Another question from Councillor Georgina Hill.
Thank you, Chair. It's obviously a huge amount of complexities in this application, but I'm minded, the decision itself seems quite simple to me with the huge economic benefits, and I think I should put that on record, because I don't think I'm going to be still here when it comes to the vote, because I've got to go to another pressing meeting. Just a couple of questions. I did have another one, which is Rob's just answered. It's just more background, really. Can I just confirm that the current land ownership, does British Vault own that land currently, or is this pre-land purchase?
Could I advise members not to take any consideration into land ownership in coming to a decision?
That's not to do with the decision, that's just sort of background information.
Contextually, the land has been sold to British Vault, but it is conditional on them developing the scheme. So in other words, it cannot be sat on by them and nothing happens. So if they do not build the site, the land will revert in its ownership. Okay.
Thank you. And just the other quick question I had, again, this isn't absolutely material, but is the, the huge economic benefits that we've talked about, how much of an impact is the recent announcement in Sunderland, the battery factory there, which is obviously going to
Yeah.
supply Nissan, etc. How much of an impact is that? And obviously, there's no danger to the project as a whole because of that development.
No. At a basic headline figure, I think there are two important considerations here. That firstly, that the Nissan proposal, which is at a very, very early stage, is only a third the size of this proposal. And it is aimed at supplying batteries into cars manufactured at the Nissan plant in Sunderland. This scheme is aiming at a UK and potentially beyond market, but it is clear that even by both of those two plants at full capacity, it will only potentially achieve a fifth of the output this country needs. So the advantage to this county isn't just in terms of this site. It's the fact because we've got a very strong pattern emerging of us being seen as a favoured location for people interested in renewable energy. We need to see this scheme as part of the economic restructuring of the county to actually re-find a strength it has lost historically, because of the contraction of traditional industries. And we can see that this will be the first part of the new generation of economic development. And there could well be capacity for more battery production in Northumberland. So to be clear, the Sunderland scheme is, I think, a welcome addition to the North East's sort of critical mass in this new industrial sector. Thank you.
Question from Councillor Malcolm Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two highways questions, but first, can I ask David a question about the habitat? The habitat mitigation, when we talk about Portland, is this going to be a like-for-like scheme? I presume not.
No, it isn't. That's a very good question. The sort of habitats that have developed at the coal stocking yard have essentially developed because of the nature of the substrate, that very poor sort of post-industrial land, which is surprisingly good for a lot of different plant species. So to attempt a like-for-like would involve the importation of huge amounts of similar material to Potland Burn, which environmentally would bring a range of its own problems. So what we have done is to characterise the site in terms of what's important and looked for equivalents. So we know that the site's important for wading birds, and we can create different habitats at Potland Burn which will also support a similar range of wading birds. We know the coal stocking yard's important for diverse plant communities, short flowering plant communities and the invertebrates associated with those. And similarly, we can create habitat at Potland Burn because the soil's right for diverse plant communities, which again will attract associated invertebrate communities. So it's not like for like, but we've focused on creating something for equivalent taxa, if you like.
Yeah.
So there will be similarities, yes.
Thank you. And my two highways questions, I'll ask them together because they're kind of related. From day one, and I'm not just being parochial and provincial here, but British Road Blythe isn't actually where it is. Now, the reason I'm mentioning it again is because there is a serious point to make. You are going to have people coming up here from all over the country, possibly from all over the continent, and they don't know where Blythe is. They don't know the local area. You tank up the M1, the A1, the A90, and you get onto Spine Road, and what do you see? Blythe Energy Central. Now, if I was a lorry driver, I would think, hello, this is my destination. So I'm asking, are we going to see road signs as soon as we start here, if this gets approved, indicating where the proper venue is for this application? My second question, again about transport. I don't know if many people used it, but if Brock Lane is the preferred route into the site, then coming off the Spine Road onto the flyover, you've got a left-hand lane and a right-hand lane. You won't get an articulated lorry in the right-hand lane being able to turn right. I don't think it's possible. So have we got a plan to maybe make that turning a little bit wider to facilitate that sort of delivery?
Yeah. Okay, Councillor Robinson. I can answer the first part of that question and the first part of the second part of that question. First of all, I think it's a good point you've made there. And when you look around the rest of the country at, say, the Nissan plant and at the Toyota plant in the Midlands, very clearly as very significant locations of economic activity, there will be bespoke road signage. As much from promotional aspect, I would say, Malcolm. Secondly, in terms of your question about the physical geometries of the highway network to cope with the likely traffic, I can absolutely confirm that we've looked at every routing issue on this technically. However, I'm going to pass over to Chris Mead, our new, as I said, head of highways, to give you a more technical answer to that. Okay.
Thanks, Rob. Head of highways might be a stretch, but I'll take highways development manager for now. Certainly, in terms of your concerns relating to swept path analysis, we have undertaken all the swept path analysis necessary. Fundamentally, though, if any applicant was ever to cause a harm to our highway with their logistical enterprises, we would secure a Section 59 agreement with them and make sure the work was undertaken. So that sits outside of planning. But we would always make sure our highway was not harmed as a consequence of someone else's actions due to development, because we have that ability to do so. In terms of the signing, we've got two things to think about there. We've got construction, because that's when your HGV drivers are really going to be turning up, the unknown ones. So we will work with them on the construction management plan. We'll make sure that that is correctly signed and that people know where to come and go from. In the operational aspect, it's probably less important, simply because the number of HGV movements per day is only about 45 to 60. A lot of those will be familiar trips. They'll know where they're coming and going from. But if there was a need for some clear signing to make sure that people didn't get confused, then we can absolutely make sure that that's delivered.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you very much. And now a question from Councillor Alec Wallace.
Thanks, Chair. Can I put it on record that I think the work done by the planning staff has just been incredible. It's made it very easy as a new member for me to understand exactly the involvement here. But I also have to speak as the ward member for Sleekburn. And the one word I haven't heard mentioned much today is residents. I hear benefits for Northumberland, benefits for the country. Where are the benefits for the community? And I have two small questions, if I may. Construction will start from day one. Peter Rolton's made that clear, and I'm quite confident it will. Who will the residents get in touch with from day one when something's gone wrong? For example, there's been an accident at Bebbside. The traffic's come through Bedlington and is now driving through East Sleekburn Village with a 3-ton weight limit on a bridge. Who, please?
Thank you for that, Councillor Wallace, and another good question. If I can just build you up through this process. Remember I talked about the conventional planning application elements of this scheme and the environmental impact assessment regulation issues. As part of the conventional dealing with this application, there was a design process where our public health team, known as public protection here, looked at all the likely adverse possible impacts on local residents, from noise, the operation of the plant, and other operational considerations. And the design of the screening and the layout of the plant reflects those discussions. And by the end of that process, our public protection team were happy with the design, subject to the recommended conditions in the report. In terms of the benefits for local people, this is why it's so important, the fact that you can add significant weight onto the economic benefit, because we haven't just said there's going to be almost 3,000 jobs and say thank you for that. We've done everything possible to make sure that local people, including those who are currently out of work or come from families with what I call low levels of economic activity have the full chance to get benefit in terms of gaining jobs from this. So just to recap, there's a local supplier strategy to do with the construction phase and the phase of the plant. There's a employment support strategy, and there's a skills support strategy. And that will actually run from before the plant opens right through the process and afterwards. And what we've not talked about is that this will put in place training and skills infrastructure that other firms that come along, hopefully on the back of this, we will be able to get them to contribute likewise into that and further build momentum. Finally, from a nuts and bolts perspective, the scheme comes with a very detailed construction management plan. And within that, there are hardwired into it arrangement for liaison arrangements with the local community for handling complaints and resolving those complaints. I'm fully aware that sometimes, say, new big house building schemes cause impacts through the construction phase. On this, we have particularly put a lot of attention onto making sure that the construction management plan covers all foreseen issues, and it is very extensive, and it is very onerous on the applicant, actually, but it is good practice. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If I can ask my second question, and that does fill me with confidence, and I'm sure it will with the residents as well. The second question is, I have to go back to residents and say to them, I've listened to the presentation, and I can understand there's only so much you can do with the ecological attributes within the site because of what's left once the Giga plant's built. But I have to explain to them why £1.7 million is going out of the area when adjacent to the site is a triple SI, where the former power station had interpretation panels up where there were 14 wading birds present. The wading birds didn't have to leave the site to go to Ashington. They already lived there. In addition, photographs in front of us show us the wonderful beach, 2 miles of beach, with 2 miles of foreshore. That's eroding. That could be a tremendous amenity for all kinds of invertebrates within the area. And to the north, the River Wansbeck, which has the unique American white crayfish, which is dying and needs looking after. And in addition, the first nature reserve ever put into Wansbeck, Castle Island, where the wildlife is leaving because the river is silted up. But none of that £1.7 million is going to be spent to benefit the residents of that community who perhaps would expect benefits coming from a superb, and I hope, a successful Giga plant into the ward. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. I can answer this question, and again, it's a good question. Okay. Right, let's start off by taking a step back here. In the media and in public discourse in this country, there's a lot of conversations at the moment about what we are going to do to halt the decline in biodiversity in this country. Okay, government is introducing a number of new ways of achieving this, primarily by a thing called net gain. And this is why the pot and burn element of this scheme is so important, okay? As David explained, this isn't a matter of saying we are losing X hectares of ecological interest and we want to replace it, okay? And it's also not the same as saying that Potland Burn is a direct replacement for this site. But what we've done though, we've looked at the characteristics of the biodiversity lost, and we have tried to not only replace what is lost, but go for a 10% uplift in biodiversity value. And while it's not a direct like-for-like replacement, why Potland Burn is so important is that the quality of what it gives us replaces the quality of what's lost in a very much direct way. And one of the areas of work which took a lot of effort from our side and from the applicant's side, who worked with us closely on this, and they're ecologists, is that actually it's not just the fact that Potland Burn offers an area of land we can use for this. Potland Burn is virtually the only piece of land in the county that enables us to achieve all those quality replacement issues as well. So ideally, you always replace biodiversity on the site, okay? And we've done as much as that as we can do, but the space on the site, as David said, is limited because of the sheer footprint of the building. So the next closest site that can offer a like for like on quality is Potland Burn, unfortunately. We will always try and do it close to the point. And with all the other examples you've given, it may well be that as other developers come forward in that area, we can look at funding those at that time. Okay, thank you.
Any more questions from the committee, ladies and gentlemen? Certainly. Councillor Stewart, second question.
Rob, jobs. I remember going to a large building site some time ago, and this company had said, we're going to provide local jobs to local people. Right, the word local is very emotive sometimes, and I hear what you say about the people living in that close vicinity. You can't really specify where local is, and I'm sure there'll be people who come from elsewhere in the country, even abroad, to work on this fantastic site if it is granted permission, it is built. Are we going to hold the company to it? Timescales for jobs being created, being filled, and can you just elaborate a little bit more on how they're going to work with DWP or who else there is? I'm sure there's people in the whole of Tynedale and further up Amble, further up the country there, would like to have jobs there as well. And are we looking at the right type of housing for people in that area? People may be coming on big salaries, lots of great skills have been brought in there. Have we got the infrastructure right there as well?
There isn't a short answer to that question. However, I'll do my best to say how we've approached this. Okay. What we've sought to achieve by the three key strategies coming with this on skills, employment and supply chains is by working with our skills teams here at the County Council, because this has been a real joined-up approach, and the planning department can't claim, all the success for how we've handled this, is our skills team have looked at mapping out gaps in skills, the areas that exhibit things like the most significant indices of multiple deprivation, where the jobs should be going. Okay, and what this scheme will do is it will tailor the support to those locations. And I have to say, to be clear, is that we cannot guarantee people from a certain area the jobs, but we can do everything we can do to give them the best chance of that. So, for example, the scheme will probably include, and this is all to be fleshed out still, but will include provisions such as where people are currently not in work, if they attend a short training course for a particular type of job, they will be guaranteed an interview. Not saying they'll be guaranteed a jobs, but it'll get them through the door, and there'll be support on CV writing and other such skills. Clearly, the jobs will be more widespread than just the immediate electoral wards around the site. However, what we can do, as part of fleshing this out with our skills team, we will put certain performance targets in for the achievement of, say, X% from various concentric rings in terms of employing local people. And bearing in mind this plant won't be up to full capacity till 2028, we can then adjust that and alter the skills approach if it isn't working in certain regards to its full potential. So in other words, if we are underachieving on certain elements of this, we can adjust that. And the way that the planning permission is structured in terms of the conditions will enable us to do that. Okay. To answer your, I think, a wider strategic economic question about how we maximise the landing of, say, the more highly skilled jobs here and the housing offer, when I opened the examination in public into the local plan, it was very clear that that was submitted in May 2019. And we have been very clear that the Borderlands deal, the North of Tyne deal, the success of Energy Central and the British Vault scheme itself, and the existence of the agreed now investment in the Northumberland line makes it clear that we need to potentially just tweak and adjust the local plan to reflect things like British Vault. And so we have got Cabinet approval to enter into a review of the local plan immediately following adoption to make sure that the alignment of housing, house type, house mix and infrastructure, say along the Northumberland line, is right, bearing in mind these changes which have happened since the submission of the plan. So just to recap, which is the Borderlands deal, the North of Tyne deal, the growth around the ports and this scheme, and then the existence of the Northumberland line. Okay, so this is very much work in progress, and this will characterise strategic planning work over the next few years. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Any more questions this afternoon, ladies and gentlemen? Oh. Over to you.
First off, I just want to say well done to everybody that's been involved. It's a fantastic presentation. So one of my questions is with regards to the traffic management heading in the other direction. I know Moor Farm has been mentioned, but North Seaton, obviously there's a lot of development happening around the North Seaton roundabout. Have the considerations been on current traffic levels or what is potentially going to be the future, because there's a lot of housing developments and whatnot around there, and it's just if there's going to be an increase in HGVs and traffic, that roundabout's already starting to see an increase in traffic for local residents. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I keep using this phrase, but that's a good question as well. Okay. What we've done as part of the local planning process is we've looked at all the commitments, i.e. things which are being built at the moment or have planning permission, or the sites which are allocated for future development. And we've looked at the likely implications on the network capacity. And you are right to point out those two roundabouts. Primarily, the key point of attention actually is Moor Farm. Okay, and there are national debates about that taking place. So what we've got is British Vault can be accommodated, and the interventions we've got planned on the other elements of infrastructure can cope with it. We are going through the process at the moment, through working through the North of Tyne Authority, of mapping out a new infrastructure plan. And what that will do is, if more development comes along, as we all hope it will, we will probably have access to funding for network improvements via that route. So British Vault we can cope with, but it doesn't leave that much headroom after that. But there are mechanisms in place to address future network capacity. I would say the most important one of which is Moor Farm, and that's what the issue which took most negotiation with Highways England to resolve as part of this. So just to give you an update, the scoping works on the engineering works to Moor Farm roundabout are proposed to be completed before 2025, and the scheme coming out of that is proposed to be implemented before 2030. But we will be trying to accelerate that to enable more development to come forward in this area. Thank you.
Is that all, Councillor Ball?
One other quick question. It's just with regards to the training development, how quickly, because that'll obviously be taking place before the site opens, how quickly can we see boots on the ground and that ready to go?
Yeah. Having spent a lot of time talking to the applicant about this scheme, they are very keen to progress as quickly as possible with the construction phase. So if members are minded to approve today, we will be straight into rolling out the training and skills work before the spade goes in the ground. But the first spade will go in the ground very, very shortly, if permission is granted today. Thank you.
Another question from Councillor Julie Foster. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Chair. Just following on from what's just been said, we have a route through my ward in Stake Ford, which whenever there's an accident on the Spine Road, most of the traffic gets diverted down this road, which is the C403. There is a weight restriction on that road, and it's just, has that been taken into account for any diversion of the larger vehicles that are going to be going on site? not so much for them going to site, because chances are they'll probably be able to turn off at the cameras turn off, but more for when they're actually heading back over, if there's been an accident that prevents them getting back onto the Spine Road. That's the usual diversion route, and that road is just, it's not capable of taking the volume of traffic generally when there's an accident, but when we then add something of this size to that non-capacity, I suppose, probably a good way of putting it, it will cause havoc. So it's just, has that been looked at, and what measures are in place to certainly prevent the HGVs going down that route and finding that they're having to turn around because there is a weight restriction on the road. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, we have we have contingencies in place for all major development sites for where the routing of the vehicles will go. It will be that the emergency rerouting will be constantly reviewed as part of this, because it will be different during the construction phase and the operational phase. But if I could ask Chris to come in here to talk about how we will manage this, and this issue does straddle between the planning side of it and the highways operational management side of it. But Chris can give us an overview of how we will handle this issue. Thank you.
It's a liaison question, really, because what Highways England do with their network and what we can do with our network and what we think is appropriate in certain circumstances. Emergencies, obviously, they have their traditional signs. I'm sure you've seen them, the diamond and circle, which is, if off the route, follow these ways. Certainly, if there's an emergency, and we felt that there was a road which was completely inappropriate, we're going to have that conversation with Highways England if it was a case of kicking them off of their strategic network. In terms of working with applicants, route logistics planning, that forms part of their general portfolio now. That's conditioned. These are the sorts of things that we're working on now that we haven't done previously. I think the main issue there would be it's about information, making sure that they do give their drivers the right information. For example, if there is an emergency, please stay on the strategic road network. Don't take a diversion, delay your journey instead of going onto the local roads. And we can talk to them about making sure they're a good occupier, essentially, and give that information to anybody who's employed or working for them, as a HGV driver would be. I can't promise great solutions at this point, but we can certainly engage with them to make sure that they understand there are things we would prefer them not to do.
Yeah, can I just come in as well? We could spend all afternoon talking about the various provisions we've got in place and the work that's been done on this scheme. One of the other matters required by condition is effectively what you call a logistics and transport management plan. And we therefore have the leverage to get issues like that factored into the operational plans of the company, and we will pick this type of issue up as the scheme develops. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Julie. No more questions, ladies and gentlemen? So I think I will now ask if anyone would like to move a motion. Councillor Malcolm Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd like to move. We accept the application with all the constraints and conditions attached. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is that seconded? Councillor Barry Flux, seconding that.
Chair, can I just clarify? Sorry, just as usual. Councillor Robinson, can I just clarify that that's to be granted as per the officer's recommendation, subject to the conditions, including the amendments that have been circulated today to those conditions, and the Section 106 agreement detailing the various provisions as detailed in the report.
Just so, thank you.
Thank you. And that's seconded.
And Councillor Barry Flux is happy with those as well.
Yeah, as Melanie said.
Thank you. Right, ladies and gentlemen, we're now open for debate. Questions have finished. Councillor Alec Wallace.
Thanks, Chair. It's hard to believe this is only my second meeting for strategic planning. I don't think we'll ever get a bigger one. It's terrific. It's in my ward. I see nothing but advantages in this application. Nothing at all. I'll take the criticism in the bar or the bacon counter of the locals when I get home, but that's another story. Chair, in the past, and I can understand residents being sceptical, in the past, with your good self, I chaired an application for a biomass plant that was coming to the Camas Battleship Wharf area for the best part of 3 years. The goalposts were closed, shifted at the 11th hour, and it fell. I chaired a number of meetings for RWEN Power for a coal-fired power station on this very site. At the 11th hour, the goalposts were changed. People in Camas today will be hoping those goalposts aren't moved. I would send a message that they won't be, because the government is committed to car battery vehicles, the electric, the new vehicles on the road by 2030. This time we are at the forefront. We are not lagging behind as we were before with a biomass and a coal-powered fire station. Camas is leading Northumberland, and that gives me the greatest pleasure to say that, Chair.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Councillor Barry Flux.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And firstly, my apologies, I couldn't make the site visit on Monday due to work commitments, but I'm sure it was a useful visit. I have driven past there in that area previously. I'd like to say that, of course, this is, I have to support this. You could not support this, really. I listened to the questions. I didn't really have many questions myself, but I did listen to the questions, and I think that most of the points, you know, people ask questions to see if you can't hang your hat on an answer, and you can hang your hat on all of those answers, really, can't you? I mean, we had questions about executive housing. Well, I can look at my ward, I can look at Councillor Lang's ward, and I can look at Councillor Robinson's ward, and there are plenty of executive houses being built in those areas. And this place will attract employment from Cramlington, from Bedlington, from Blythe, from Ashington. So yeah, North Seaton, that's it. That's it. It will attract people to live there, people who existingly live there, to go and work at this factory. And the jobs and the skills and the education. In fact, I don't think there's actually any better site in Northumberland we could find for this. If we went from 40 miles west to 60 miles north, I don't think there is a better strategic site for us to put this. As I say, it's bang near all of those towns to get into to work, and it will be an advantage to people who don't work there as well, because we have better bus services, more investment in the area, things like that. So my view is that we absolutely must support this. I can't see any reason really for us to object to it, and as far as I'm concerned, it cannot come soon enough. This is really important investment. It will bring it, like we see in the used to see in the West Midlands in the 70s and 80s, the car manufacturing industry in the West Midlands built. You had one factory, it meant that other factories came round it for the components and things like that. And I have no doubt that we will see that in the area, and that's so important to this area, wider than the towns I've mentioned. It's of strategic importance to the region. So I wholeheartedly support this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Julie Foster.
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me. First of all, just to talk about the area, Camas, the residents have been screaming out for years to have a decent bus service. And I truly hope that if this application is approved today, that it will result in Camas residents having some good benefits as a result, such as a bus service coming through, as the bus providers start seeing that there is some profit in that route, certainly. Shops, I think there's one kind of sandwich shop there at the moment. because people do go out of the area to shop. But once you have a large factory like this and you have people maybe wanting to go local for some lunches, popping into the shop, etc., I'm just hoping this actually provides a much better community for the people who actually live there and give them these things that they've wanted for so long and haven't been able to get so far. So fingers crossed that brings the benefit to those people. The other thing I just want to mention as well is electric car ownership was quite slow to take off. But in recent years, it has certainly started rising and rising a lot faster. And with technology these days, we're talking bigger and better batteries. Certainly, I can quote for one of the latest Leaf models, 240-mile range. The Teslas, they're actually exceeding that with extended batteries. So it's not quite as scary an idea to own an electric car now as what it used to be when you might have just got 40 or 60 miles out of a full charge. The infrastructure is getting better in the UK. It still has a long way to go. And I say that from experience with my husband having had an electric car in his former job. But it's getting there. And I think car ownership, electric car ownership, is going to rapidly increase, particularly because of the government's vow to actually go fully electric vehicles from 2030. So I think to have something like this on our doorstep is absolutely brilliant. I think to have that investment, certainly in the North East, to have it in Northumberland, to have it in South East Northumberland, and as has been mentioned before, but we didn't really get much of an answer from it, in Camas. It's not Blythe, it is Camas, where this factory is going. And can I make that plea that a colleague of mine has already made this today, to actually have that pointed out and made clear? It is in Camas, not Blythe. They are two separate areas. And if you have people thinking they're going to Blythe in their HGVs to deliver goods and they see the signpost for Blythe and they turn off there, they're going to completely miss Camas. They're turning off too short if they're coming north. So just to get it out there, it is Camas where it's located, and hopefully the associated signage that was discussed earlier as well will reflect that. Thank you, Chair.
Got that message. Any more contributions this afternoon? Oh, Councillor Ball.
So I am over the moon to welcome this to Camas. Firstly, it's going to hit the national green targets. It's going to help us reach them. It's going to raise aspirations of people in this area. It's going to replace industries that have been long since gone. And it's not just this generation, but the next generation as well. And I just think it's a great opportunity for Camas, the whole of South East Northumberland, and the North East and it's really putting us on the map. So I definitely support this. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Councillor Darwin?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say that I fully support this as well. I think it's not just great investment for Camas, but Northumberland as well. It's great to have this to the area. And in terms of the local plan as well, I think we are advancing on that as well, with housing and that as well. And the network for the electric vehicle charging points is getting better, but we can facilitate that further, I think, with the local plan as well. And I think this kind of feeds into that as well. It's going to benefit Northumberland, and it's put the North East with us and the Nissan factory on the map sort of thing. So I think this is only a good starting point, and there is more to come with electric vehicles being needed by 2030. So great investment to the area. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. So before I ask Councillor Robertson maybe to sum up, just a few words from your chair. I do feel we've had a really good session this afternoon, some excellent questions and answers. Obviously, we've had a very good briefing, but we also had a tip-top site visit where we learned a lot. You know, I'm a great believer in site visits. I wish we could go out and visit every application, but of course we can't. But, you know, I think we did learn a lot from that site visit yesterday. I think we've really had a thorough examination of all the planning issues. dotted the I's, crossed the T's. But like the rest of you, I do feel this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for South East Northumberland. Very excited about the jobs, the indirect jobs from the supply chain, and also the training skills programme and the employment plan. So, like the rest of you, I'm fully behind this application. Councillor Robertson, would you like to sum up today?
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, as we've heard, this is a huge application, the biggest one we've dealt with. So, along with the rest of you, I'd like to thank Rob and his planning team for the diligence and professionalism preparing this application for us. Secondly, we've listened to the application. It seems because of the work done by our planning team, a very large part of what are the associated material considerations have been dealt with. So again, thanks for that. Thirdly, I hope we all see this as a truly transformational for the immediate area with so many levels of deprivation. Over the last few decades, we've seen large-scale employers close and leave, and at last we've had a chance to redress that imbalance. I've no doubt the knock-on effects will be hugely beneficial for all of our communities which surround the plant, as well as others further afield. The company has stated it puts great emphasis on its social governance, and we even see a social value manager, and I hope that's a sign of things to come. So all in all, no problem in proposing this application, and I hope it goes through unanimously, because that will send a clear message, nationally and internationally. Northumberland is open for large-scale businesses. Come and see how we can help you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. And the vote now, ladies and gentlemen. Melanie, are we all right to do it by a show of hands? Yeah. All those in favour of the application, would you like to raise your hand, please? Unanimous. Well done, everybody. Thank you. I think that was the right decision. I'm going to suggest now we have just a 5-minute break before we consider the second application, which is the one for the substations. Just a 5-minute break. Planning Committee, I'd like to resume our meeting today, and we now deal with the second application on our agenda, which is the provision of temporary substations and associated cabling for the construction of the proposed Giga plant. Judith, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. There was just one update on the sheet that went round earlier today, and it was to add a further condition. So are 4 conditions in your report, and there is one on the update sheet that needs to be added as well. So the Chair's just described what this application is for. Again, the location plans here that we've already seen. This is the substation locations. It's not the best of plans, so I'll go through it with you. This second drawing here is just an enlarged version of that first one, and the third down the bottom is an enlarged version of that area there to the north of the site. So the 4 substations will be located, 2 in this corner here, 1 about halfway down, and the other one is in this location here. I've just gone back to the master plan because it might be better to show you on here. So again, the 2 substations will be up there, 1 about halfway down and 1 further around this area here. There will be just over 2.4 metres in height, 3.4 metres in width and 3.3 metres in length, so relatively small in scale. The purpose of the substations is to provide site temporary high voltage electrical connections and infrastructure for the construction works. Individually and cumulatively, the substations will be barely visible, particularly so as the construction works of the Giga plant progress, and also due to the extensive tall trees placed around the site boundary. These are just some of the substation details, so really that's looking down on the substations. These 2 is what you'll see sort of on approach to the substations, how they will look. And it gives you a good idea of the size of them there with the sort of indicative person stood next to them. And again, some further substation details here, slightly larger scale. No objections have been received to the proposals for the substations. Therefore, the application is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions within the report and the 5th condition that I mentioned on the update sheet. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. No questions? Would someone like to move a motion? Councillor Barry Flux?
I'll move approval, Chair.
Is that seconded? Seconded by Councillor Stewart.
Again, Chair, can I just clarify? So that's it's be granted as per the officer's recommendation with the 4 conditions and the 5th additional condition on the update.
Absolutely correct, yes.
Thank you. Any debate on this issue? No debate, so I think we'll move to a vote on this. All those in favour of the second application? Unanimous. Well, that was extremely swift, Planning Committee. Well done.
A good question.
And really, the rest of the agenda this afternoon, we've got an appeals update for members' information. We've also got a Section 106 agreements update report for information. Will members accept those? And I have no urgent business today, so I'd like to thank you for your attendance and your contributions today. Well done. Thank you.